This woman was tortured for 20 grueling hours for speaking up against a very well-known cartel. And then she was dumped in a jail cell and slapped with a fake lawsuit to have her silenced permanently. But what she did next shocked everybody, including her torturers. Here are some times cartels messed with the wrong influencers. December 2005, Cancun, Mexico. Journalist Lydia Cacho was walking to her car when armed men surrounded her. They showed police badges, but their eyes showed something else. They were here to silence her forever. 20 hours of torture were about to begin. Just 6 months earlier, Cacho published The Demons of Eden, exposing a trafficking ring that reached the highest levels of Mexican power. She'd name names: governors, senators, businessmen, and drug cartels. These were men who bought and sold children like merchandise. And now, they wanted her dead. The police drove her hundreds of miles from Cancun to Puebla, stopping repeatedly to torture her. Their goal was to get her to confess that her book was a lie.
Si me desaparecen en el mar, mi familia va a pasar toda su vida buscándome. Y enamoradísima me divorcié del único hombre con el que me he casado, que estuvimos 13 años juntos, porque yo sabía.
For 20 hours, they debated whether to kill her, and at one point they even made a phone call to their boss, who was none other than the governor of Puebla. But Cacho spent years preparing for this moment. She documented every threat and photographed every aggressor. Plus, her team of 43 women at the high-security shelter she ran were trained the same way. What her torturers didn't know was that Cacho had already given all her evidence to international journalists. She recorded a video saying,
"If they kill me, it's because of this."
The torture continued, but Cacho's mind stayed clear. This wasn't her first death threat, and it wouldn't be her last. Finally, after a grueling 20-hour torture session, her kidnappers decided to let her go. But she still wasn't in the clear. In fact, she was taken to a nearby prison in Puebla, where she'd later learned she'd be charged with defamation. Later in court, Cacho testified for 7 hours against the very men responsible for her torture.
Queriendo estar bien, yo estaba bien. Yo tengo muchos problemas de salud como consecuencia de todo el trabajo que he hecho.
Her calmness came from knowing she stood for something bigger. Behind her were mothers who'd lost children, the girls who'd been sold for $3,000. She was their shield.
They were buying and selling children from Mexico, from Florida, and from other countries in Latin America, like Paraguay and El Salvador.
The network she exposed was more about power than it was about trafficking. These men created a system of political protection, judicial immunity, and money laundering. Cacho understood the price of her investigation. She'd already been threatened for years through radio and TV shows, where she exposed abusers while protecting victims' identities. But this was different. This reached the Secretary of Interior, the man who controlled Mexico's federal police. After surviving the torture, Cacho didn't back down. She fought her false imprisonment charges and won. Then she went after her torturers, one by one, and the officer who tortured her, alongside the governor who ordered it, were all jailed. But the cost was everything. 7 assassination attempts followed, her dogs were poisoned, and her life became a series of safe houses and bodyguards. Finally, in 2019, after surviving another attempt on her life, Cacho made the hardest decision. She went into exile.
Pérdida monumental cuando te exilias. Me dijo un médico aquí que yo tenía el síndrome de la exiliada, que es que quedas con el corazón partido.
Cacho continues investigating to this day from Spain. She exposed trafficking networks in 147 countries, written multiple books, and won over 60 international awards. But every night, she dreams of returning to Mexico. Her former colleagues call her a coward for leaving. They'd prefer her as a symbol, another dead journalist. But Cacho chose something harder than martyrdom. She chose to live and keep fighting.
Y viven de nuestro miedo, ¿no? Nos dan de comer miedo y nosotros les retribuimos con la parálisis, ¿no? Con la parálisis en la opinión, con la parálisis.
Today, Kamel Nassif, the man said to have orchestrated her torture, walks free, released by the current Mexican government. But Cacho has an Interpol warrant for his arrest in other countries, and she's still hunting. Meanwhile, the next entry on this list is doing some serious hunting as well. The only difference, They're hunting for information to help the people who are fighting the good fight, and they're so good at hiding their tracks that no one even knows their names. March 2010, Mexico. A computer screen's glowing in a darkened room. Anonymous hands are typing out details of a massacre that isn't going to make the morning news. 14 bodies are found, of which 3 were missing their heads. And within minutes, thousands would read what the Mexican media was too terrified to report. A small website called Blog del Narco had just gone live, and Mexico's drug war would never be the same. The mainstream media have already surrendered after cartels killed 72 journalists between 2000 and 2010. Most newspapers stopped covering drug violence entirely. TV stations looked the other way, and journalists had a good reason to fear for their lives.
5,000 y 40,000 pesos. No es caro. Entonces tenemos precio.
Lately, we've fallen victim to criminality, to abuse of power, situations that are beyond our control. As a media worker, I'm very worried. I trust in the authorities and ask them to do their job as they should.
Into this silence came a simple blogspot page that dared to document everything. The posts were clinical, almost medical in their precision. No editorializing, no sensationalism. Just facts the cartels didn't want published.
3:47 a.m. 5 members of Los Zetas executed in Tamaulipas. Bodies show signs of torture. 11:23 p.m. Convoy of 20 trucks seen heading north on Highway 85. Gulf Cartel insignia is visible. Warning to residents of Reynosa. Firefight expected tonight between 8 to 10 p.m. Stay indoors.
Within months, Blog del Narco managed to become Mexico's most read news source. Citizens finally had real-time information about the war zone they lived in. They could check which routes were safe and which neighborhoods to avoid when violence was coming. The cartels were furious. Their power depended on controlling information. Now someone was exposing their operations to millions. The death threats started immediately. Comments flooded in.
We know who you are. Your family will pay. Stop posting, or we'll skin you alive.
And Blog del Narco posted them all. But then came the hunt. The cartels were desperate to find out who was behind the website, but the blogger or bloggers learned from previous victims. They would use proxy servers, encrypted connections, and public Wi-Fi from different locations. They never met sources in person, and they accepted payment. 2011 brought their biggest test. Maria Macias, a 39-year-old journalist who moderated a similar forum, was found dead. Her head was placed on her keyboard with a note.
I am Laredo Girl, and I am here because of my reports.
Blog del Narco posted the photos along with the story, much to the surprise of many who were following their stories. It was clear that they had no intention of slowing down. 2013. Blog del Narco became too big to kill. International media started quoting their stories, and even the authorities used them for intelligence. But the pressure was crushing. Posts became irregular. Sometimes weeks would pass in silence. This made their followers fear the worst. Then, in 2013, a cryptic message appeared.
We are still here. We will always be here. But the cost grows higher each day.
The blogger revealed they'd lost friends, family members, everything. They lived in constant motion, never staying anywhere too long. In 2014, a reporter who went by the alias of Lucy Brown claimed to be part of Blog del Narco and fled to Spain seeking asylum. But the post continued, suggesting multiple people ran the site. The real identity or identities remain unknown. Today, Blog del Narco still exists, though posts are sporadic. Its legacy lives on in dozens of similar sites, and an entire network of anonymous watchers documenting what cartels do in the darkness.
We'll keep on informing, but the most important thing is to stay alive.
Now, the entry in this next list isn't exactly a person. It's a faceless collective who did what no army could do. They managed to get the cartels to beg for mercy. And that's a story worth telling. October 2011, Veracruz, Mexico. A masked figure appears on YouTube, speaking through a voice modulator.
Los Zetas, you have made a grave mistake. We are anonymous. We do not forgive. We do not forget.
The hackers had just declared war on Mexico's most violent cartel.
¿Puede un grupo de hackers tener el suficiente poder como para declarar la guerra a un grupo criminal? Al parecer sí. Eso fue justamente lo que hizo un grupo autodenominado Anonymous Iberoamérica.
In the age of social media, you don't need millions of followers to be an influencer. Sometimes all you need is a Guy Fawkes mask and the ability to destroy lives with a keystroke. Anonymous had been watching as Los Zetas terrorized Mexico. They watched as journalists got murdered, bloggers disappeared, and anyone speaking out against the cartel ended up being hanged from bridges or worse. But then the Zetas made a critical error. They kidnapped an anonymous member in Veracruz. The hackers' response was quick. They launched Operation Paperstorm and issued an ultimatum.
Queremos que la Marina y el Ejército sepan que estamos cansados del grupo delictivo de los Zetas, que se han dedicado a secuestrar, robar y extorsionar en diversas formas, una de ellas el derecho de piso.
This wasn't an empty threat either. Anonymous had already hacked government databases, corporate servers, and intelligence agencies worldwide. And now they turned their skills against the cartels. Los Zetas had never faced an enemy like this. You can't shoot a decentralized network. You can't intimidate people hiding behind 7 proxies in countries you can't even pronounce. But the Zetas had their own cyber division, and they started hunting. What followed would be the first cyber war between hackers and a drug cartel. Anonymous members reported strange cars outside their homes. IP addresses were traced, and some hackers even vanished completely. The Zetas issued their threat. For every name released, they will kill 10 innocent people in Veracruz. Inside Anonymous, panic spread. Members argued in encrypted chat rooms. Some wanted to proceed with the data dump, while others realized they were playing with forces they didn't understand.
We received expressions of solidarity as well as the voices of people crying for help. These outpourings of support serve as a powerful reminder that we are not alone in our struggle.
But support wouldn't stop bullets. As November approached, their deadline for releasing data, Anonymous members started backing out. The operation that began with dozens of hackers dwindled into just a handful. Then, unexpectedly, the Zetas blinked first. They released the kidnapped Anonymous member with no explanation. They just dropped him off in a street corner, asking Anonymous to call off their dogs in return. Anonymous declared victory and canceled Operation Paperstorm. Both sides retreated, understanding they'd nearly triggered an all-out war. And while this standoff could be seen as a happy ending, it did reveal something crucial: that even the cartels feared exposure. Anonymous had found their weakness, not with guns nor governments, but with information. Today, Mexican cartels employ full cybersecurity teams. Turns out what they learned back in 2011 is that in the digital age, a teenager with a laptop could be more dangerous than a rival cartel with automatic weapons. But while Anonymous fought with keyboards and code, our next influencer would discover that running away doesn't have to mean defeat. October 2013, Mexico City. 11 gunmen surrounded a house, weapons drawn. They're looking for journalist Annabel Hernandez, who had just exposed government officials on Sinaloa's cartel payroll. Now, Hernandez wasn't home that day, but her bodyguards were, and it turns out that the attackers stormed the wrong house. Her neighbors. When they finally realized their mistake, they grabbed one of Hernandez's bodyguards and beat him for hours before dumping him on the street. And while they didn't reach their intended target, their message was clear: we know where you live. This attack left Hernandez so shaken that she was forced to make a decision no one should have to make.
In that moment, for me, was the time to leave Mexico. Not because because I became conscious that I was dangerous for the people around me.
3 years earlier, Hernandez published Los Señores del Narco, a book that named names. Not just street-level dealers or cartel soldiers, but government ministers, police chiefs, military commanders, all taking cartel money.
One of the most powerful men in the government want to kill me because I reveal in my book that he was in the payroll of the Sinaloa cartel.
As a result, the Mexican government decided to give her bodyguards. the same government whose corruption she was exposing. But Hernandez called it what it was.
A journalist who has to walk with bodyguards is an embarrassment for any nation.
The death threats started immediately after the book's release. Hernandez started receiving phone calls, and she noticed men following her children to school on several occasions. And then came the house attack. 11 armed men were sent to kill her in her own home.
I think that the group thought that I was there because my bodyguards were taking care of my house. One of them disappeared. One of my bodyguards was taken and beaten for a long time.
After this attack, Hernandez had to make a tough choice. Either stay in Mexico and wait for the next attempt, or leave everything behind and keep investigating from exile. She chose exile. But as far as the cartels were concerned, that didn't mean they won. Hernandez continued her work from Europe. She would launch new investigations, which yielded new revelations about cartel government connections. The cartels thought distance would silence her, but they were wrong.
I hope that my work can help to the people to understand what is happening. And if the people understand what is happening, the people can change the things.
Hernandez remains in exile to this day, still publishing investigations that shake Mexico's power structure. The government still offers her protection, the latest being a bulletproof vest. Yeah, she hasn't worn it once. But while Hernandez decided to stand up to some of the most violent men in the world, our next entry gives the saying, "If you can't beat 'em, join 'em," an entirely new meaning.
As an actor and a filmmaker, I cannot say no. You know, it's a big opportunity to have, for the first time, someone tell his story, being alive, being the biggest drug lord.
October 2nd, 2015, Mexican mountains. Kate Del Castillo sits across from the world's most wanted drug lord, discussing movie rights. Hidden cameras recorded every word. But what she didn't know was that Mexican intelligence was also watching, and they were about to capture the world's most wanted fugitive. Kate thought she was pursuing the role of a lifetime. Born into Mexican entertainment royalty in 1972, Kate had spent decades fighting typecasting. She'd moved to Hollywood, starred in La Reina del Sur as a drug queenpin, and built a career playing powerful women. But now she had her sights on something more ambitious. She wanted to produce El Chapo's biopic, and that connection started with a tweet. In 2012, Kate wrote,
"Today, I believe more in El Chapo Guzman than I do in the governments that hide truths from me."
The message went viral, but one reader in particular paid special attention: El Chapo himself. 3 years later, Chapo's lawyers reach out. The drug lord wants to tell his story, and he wants Kate to produce it. She saw the opportunity to create something unprecedented.
Quiero dejar en claro el contenido de esta entrevista es exclusivo para la señorita Kate del Castillo y el señor Sean Penn.
What she didn't see were surveillance teams already watching her every move. Mexican intelligence had been monitoring her communications since that tweet, and when they intercepted messages about a potential meeting, they saw their chance. El Chapo had evaded capture for 13 years, escaping from max security prisons twice, and like many, his ego would be his downfall. Kate had arranged the meeting through encrypted messages. She brought in two-time Oscar winner Sean Penn to write an article. They thought they were being careful. They switched cars frequently and used burner phones. But the government tracked him anyway. October 2nd, 2015, somewhere in the Sierra Madre Mountains, Kate and Penn had spent 7 hours with El Chapo. They discussed his life, his business, as well as his desire for Hollywood fame. El Chapo was charming and seemed eager to impress the actress who defended him publicly. He gave him his personal phone number, started texting Kate directly, even sent her messages complimenting her. In one, he would say,
"I have faith you will be comfortable. I will care for you more than I do for my own eyes."
In which Kate replied,
"I'm so moved that you would say you will take care of me. No one has ever taken care of me."
The authorities let the communications continue. It became apparent that El Chapo was trying to impress Kate, and he became sloppy as a result.
But it's a little seductive, that line, isn't it?
When your life is in risk, I don't think so.
He ended up committing several rookie mistakes, like revealing locations, mentioning associates, and, worst of all, disclosing his top-secret travel plans. These very texts would mark the beginning of his end. January 8, 2016. Mexican Marines raided El Chapo's hideout in Los Mochis. He escapes through the sewers but is captured a few hours later. And when authorities reveal how they found him, one detail stood out. His communications with Kate del Castillo were just as crucial as the operation itself.
Guzman's intention to have a biographical film made, for which he established contact with actresses and producers, was a fundamental aspect that allowed us to locate him,
the Attorney General announced. After Chapo's arrest, Kate's world exploded. Death threats flooded her social media. Cartel supporters blamed her for El Chapo's capture. The Mexican government investigated her for money laundering and criminal association. She couldn't even return to Mexico, and her career was in ruins. But worst of all, her life was now in danger. When the investigation found no evidence of criminal activity, she would sue the Mexican government for harassment and defamation. In interviews, Kate maintained that she was just an actress trying to tell a story, and that she had no idea that she was bait in a years-long intelligence operation. The government used her as an unwitting asset, then threw her to the wolves when the mission succeeded.
I was not aware of that situation. I was just trying to make a movie.
Today, she lives under constant security. And when it comes to El Chapo, it was his vanity, or more specifically, his need to be remembered, to have his story told by beautiful actresses, that proved to be his biggest weakness. And Kate del Castillo proved to be the perfect bait, whether she knew it or not. But our next influencer would face a different challenge. Either face the cartel head-on, or lose everything he worked for. September 10th, 2023, Tijuana, Mexico. Banners appeared overnight across the city. Black letters on white sheets hung from overpasses and plastered on walls. They read,
"This goes for you, Peso Pluma. Refrain from performing on October 14th. It'll be your last performance because of your disrespectful loose tongue. If you perform, we will break your face."
They were signed CJNG. Now, Peso Pluma was scheduled to perform that night for 100,000 fans. The 24-year-old had become Mexico's biggest musical export, with 50 million monthly Spotify listeners.
The biggest right now, Peso Pluma, the biggest narco corrido singer, is dedicated several songs to the Chapitos. They like to be in the limelight. They like to be narcos.
But he'd made one crucial mistake. He name-dropped the wrong cartel boss. You see, in Mexico, narco corridos might seem like simple songs, but they're actually death sentences waiting to happen. Chalino Sanchez learned that lesson back in '92 when he read his own death threat on stage and then was executed hours later. Yossi Lacote discovered it in 2018 when CJNG dismembered him for simply showing one of their rivals' support in one of his music videos. Lefty SM found out just 3 weeks before Peso's concert, when 3 masked men executed him in his own home. The pattern has always been the same. Praise the wrong cartel and die. The CJNG controlled the whole of Tijuana, and Peso Pluma had just praised their rival, El Chapo of the Sinaloa cartel. And to make it even worse, Peso was from Jalisco, also known as a CJNG home state. Now they saw his Sinaloa shout-out as the ultimate betrayal. The threats escalated quickly. First, the banners, messages to his management, and then men showing up at venues, asking questions. Hours before showtime, with fans already gathering at the venue, Peso Pluma does something so many rappers before him hadn't. He listened to the warnings.
Popular Mexican singer postponing several shows because of death threats in one of those concerts.
His team releases a statement citing security concerns. Yeah, the fans were disappointed, but hey, understood. In Mexico, when cartels issue warnings, you listen. Or you end up like Chalino, Yossi, and Lefty. The cancellation cost Peso Pluma millions in ticket sales, but you can't put a price on life. Unlike the narco rappers who came before him, Peso Pluma read the room. He postponed his entire Mexican tour and quietly left the country. No defiant last performance, and definitely not choosing pride over survival. The CJ&G made their point, and Peso Pluma, hey, got the message. Today, he's still performing worldwide, but carefully avoids certain Mexican cities. His Spotify numbers keep climbing, but his lyrics have changed. He's no longer doing cartel name drops, and definitely not choosing any side. But while Peso Pluma did outsmart the cartels by canceling a concert, the next person on this list is known across the globe, and he's about to turn an entire industry against one of the most powerful gangs in his country. 1980s Hong Kong International Airport. The Airbus A300 barely touched down when the first bullet punched through the fuselage, and another. Jackie Chan, returning from Hollywood after fleeing death threats, watched as armed triad members surrounded the plane. Oh, they wanted their money, and they wanted it now. Jackie Chan's a man who needs no introduction. But what many don't know is that he's not only celebrated for his remarkable martial arts skills and blockbuster films loved around the world, but also for his courageous stand against organized crime. Jackie Chan was born in Hong Kong on April 7, 1954. And he was immersed in acting from a very young age, eventually becoming a household name in Hong Kong cinema. Yet despite all his success, Jackie found himself increasingly frustrated with the limitations placed on him by the industry, particularly around the time when it was being controlled by various gangs. Chan had his fair share of brush-offs with the Chinese triads throughout his career. They are an organized crime gang with a huge amount of influence over Hong Kong's entertainment industry. And for decades, the triads controlled this industry like puppet masters. Directors had paid protection money, and actors would take whatever roles they were told. But those who refused would usually disappear. Now, Chan has already said no once. That's why he fled to America in the first place.
我就話嚟到現場，先俾5萬佢哋，跟住每日俾5000。臨拆警嗰日就要俾3萬，如果唔係就燒報警。我覺得好離譜啊！嗰啲人嗰啲樣咧仲係。
But now he was back, and the message was clear. Nobody says no to the triads twice. What happens next would change Hong Kong cinema forever. After the airport shooting, Chan made a decision that shocked everyone who knew him. Instead of hiring bodyguards or just fleeing again, he started carrying 3 guns at all time for protection.
From that moment on, I needed to carry a gun every day when I went out.
And his intuition was spot on. 2 weeks later, Chan's eating dinner at a restaurant in Causeway Bay when 20 armed triad members walked in. They surround his table, weapons visible under their jackets. Chan reaches under the table, where he'd hidden 2 pistols. Then he stood up, pulled out a 3rd gun, and told them things had gone too far. The triads weren't used to actors fighting back, especially not with their own weapons.
I'm the first one to say in the newspaper, I hate the bloody gangster.
But Chan wasn't done yet. He knew other actors were getting the same treatment. Entertainers like Maggie Cheung, Joey Wong, and Jackie Cheung, all household names in their own right, were bullied similarly. And the threats were only escalating. So Chan does something unprecedented. He spent $500,000 hiring protection from mainland China, not for himself, but for every peer being threatened. Then he founded the Hong Kong Performing Artists Guild, creating the first organized resistance against triad control of the film industry. The triads had made a critical mistake. They thought Jackie Chan was just another action star playing tough on the screen. But what they didn't realize was that he's been doing his own stunts for years. Real fights, real injuries, and real pain. And unlike his movies, this time there were no retakes. Today, the Hong Kong film industry operates free from triad control, largely thanks to Chan's stand. He managed to turn his real-life fight scene into a movement that protected an entire industry. But while Jackie Chan would fight with guns and organizations, the next entry on this list would face the cartels with nothing but sheer courage and a simple doll. July 21st, 2023, Tamaulipas, Mexico. While millions flocked to theaters for the Barbie movie premiere, Delia Quiroga unveiled her own creation on social media. A Barbie dressed in cargo pants and boots, carrying search equipment and wearing a shirt with a missing person's photo. But this wasn't a movie tie-in, it was a mother's scream for help. The photo of the doll shirt showed Roberto Quiroga, Delia's brother, who vanished back in 2014. And just like 100,000 other Mexicans who've disappeared, Roberto simply never came home one day. In a country where cartels make people vanish daily, Delia decided to turn a child's toy into a symbol of Mexico's rampant kidnapping epidemic.
Entonces, en ese sentido, pues fue también, ¿no? Para poner el tema sobre la mesa y como un acto de memoria, ¿no? De que
The Barbie Buscadora, meaning Searcher Barbie, went viral within hours. Mothers who'd spent years searching for their children finally saw their struggle reflected in popular culture. This doll carried the tools they knew too well: GPS devices, shovels, and protective gear, survival equipment for mothers forced to become forensic investigators. Every weekend across Mexico, groups of mothers searched fields, dug up unmarked graves, and sifted through bones. They do the job local authorities won't do, looking for any trace of their missing children. Many had found cartel mass graves. Some had found their loved ones, but most find only more questions. And Delia's Barbie captured this horrific new normal. The response split Mexico. Supporters praised Delia for forcing people to confront the crisis. Critics accused her of exploiting tragedy for social media attention. Now, some even said that she was normalizing violence by turning it into a doll. But for Delia, the controversy meant that people were finally talking about the disappeared. The timing was deliberate. As Barbie mania was sweeping the world, Delia managed to hijack the conversation. International media picked up the story. And suddenly, supporters who came to cover a movie are asking about Mexico's missing. The cartels noticed too. In Tamaulipas, drawing attention to the disappeared makes you a target. The state is controlled by warring factions of the Gulf Cartel and Los Zetas. Bodies appear daily, and those who ask questions often join the missing. Delia knew these risks all too well. Other searcher mothers had also been threatened, attacked, and even killed for their activism. But 9 years of searching for Roberto had stripped away her fear. Within weeks, other mothers had created their own searcher Barbies. Each doll wore a photo of someone missing, and together they formed an army of plastic witnesses to Mexico's disappeared. Delia had done what years of protest couldn't. She made the crisis relatable to people who'd never experienced it. Today, Delia continues searching for Roberto, while running support groups for other families. Her searcher Barbie sits on her desk as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful protest comes in the smallest package. May 5th, 1968. Soledad State Prison, California. Danny Trejo sitting in solitary confinement, facing the death penalty for assault. At 24 years old, he'd already spent most of his youth cycling through California's most violent prisons, from San Quentin to Folsom, and now Soledad. But in that cell, something broke inside him, or maybe something finally healed. Trejo's path to this moment started early. First drug deal at age 7, hard drug addiction by the age of 12, and by high school he's stabbing kids in the face with broken bottles. The barrios of LA claimed another child, molding him into exactly what the streets demanded, which was a survivor willing to do just about anything. Inside California's prisons, Trejo found himself surrounded by Mexican mafia members and cartel-connected inmates. In places like these, violence becomes a currency.
If you're going to go to prison, you better make it. There's only two kinds of people in prison. There's predator and prey. That's all. If you don't want to be prey, then pay a predator.
The prison yards were divided by race and gang affiliation, and disrespect usually meant death, but snitching meant worse. Trejo watched inmates get stabbed in the shower, beaten in their cells, and thrown off tiers. He participated in prison riots where the carnage was so severe, guards refused to enter until the violence burned itself out. In his memoir, Trejo describes the constant paranoia he had to deal with as a result.
You could never relax. Every meal, every shower, every walk across the yard, you had to be ready to kill or be killed.
But in that solitary cell in 1968, facing possible execution, Trejo made a desperate bargain with God. If he survived, He would dedicate his life to helping others escape the path he'd taken.
I was taught from a very young age that loyalty runs deep, but so does betrayal. Life on the streets is a game of survival. But in that cell, God killed the old me, made me a new Danny Trejo.
When Trejo got out in 1969, the transformation was real. And instead of returning to the streets, he decided to get clean. His old associates couldn't understand it. This was a guy who survived riots and retaliation hits. And now he's preaching recovery. For 16 years, Trejo worked as a youth counselor, speaking at schools and juvenile halls. He'd show kids his scars, tell them about friends who died in gang wars, and he would describe the reality of prison life.
You know, the minute you're a rapper, the minute you're a performer, you're no longer a damn gangster. You have just turned into a businessman.
Then in 1985, Trejo's life would take yet another unexpected turn. He ends up on a movie set after being asked to help a young actor stay sober. The film was Runaway Train, and they needed someone to train actor Eric Roberts on how to box like a convict. The second Trejo takes off his shirt, revealing a massive tattoo of a woman wearing a sombrero across his chest, ink earned in prison, the director knew he'd found something special. And they offered him a small part. Suddenly, Hollywood's newest tough guy is Danny Trejo. And as he would rise in fame, he would make a single non-negotiable demand. His villains always had to die horribly on screen. He'd played too many real monsters to let fictional ones win. Every contract included this clause: the bad guy loses.
I've buried too many friends who thought life was glamorous,
he explained.
Kids need to see there's no glory in it.
But his fame would also bring some unexpected challenges. His old enemies would recognize him on the street, and some even wanted to test if this Hollywood actor had gone soft. But they learned quickly that while Trejo had changed, he hadn't forgotten who he was. Today, at 80 years old, Trejo has over 400 movie cameos to show for. He owns restaurants, writes children's books, and still counsels addicts. When young actors ask how he plays villains so convincingly, Trejo's answer is very straightforward.
I'm not playing, I'm remembering, and then I make sure they get what they deserve.
But Danny Trejo isn't the only person on this list who goes from dealing with shady cartels to being at the top of their game. In fact, this next person was catapulted into global fame after a single terrifying encounter. May 24th, 2000, outside a house in Queens, New York, a grandmother tends to her garden. Her grandson, Curtis Jackson, is sitting nearby. In seconds, 9 bullets would tear through his body. Yet somehow, Curtis survives and goes on to become one of the most recognizable names in hip-hop, an entertainer better known as 50 Cent. Now before this shooting, Curtis Jackson was just another kid from Queens trying to make it in rap. Growing up in South Jamaica's rough streets, he lived with his grandmother after his mother was murdered when he was 8. Ever since then, music and hustling became his way out. By 2000, he'd caught the attention of Jam Master Jay and was about to release his first single, How to Rob, a song that mocked big-name rappers. But someone else had noticed him too. 50 Cent had grown up in Queens, right? Where Kenneth Supreme McGriff's drug empire controlled everything. The Supreme Team gang had hundreds of gang members, moving drugs throughout all 5 boroughs of New York. And in Queens, McGriff's word was law. Now, McGriff ran his organization like a corporation. Anyone threatening his business ended up dead. So when 50's lyrics started hitting too close to home, McGriff decided to send a message. He wanted to show what happened to people who spoke about his operations, even in songs. That May afternoon started normally for the Jackson family.
Right behind me is my grandmother's home. I came out like 12 o'clock in the afternoon, May 24th. She was bent over, actually, planting flowers in the garden, and I walked over here to sit next.
But then everything exploded into violence.
Car pulled up on the side of us. A guy got out the passenger seat of that car, came around behind it, and shot through the actual car.
9 bullets hit 50 at close range, in his hand, arm, hip, both legs, chest, and left cheek. 1 bullet lodged so close to his jaw that it permanently affected his voice, giving him that slurred speech he's known for today.
All you know is it's a life-threatening situation. It's just not. I've seen people go into the hospital under circumstances that were way less intense and not come out.
Against all odds, 50 Cent survived, and people started calling him superhuman.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt as much as people imagine it hurts because of your adrenaline and how the shock of what's actually going on, it hurts after.
The police and media pressed him to name names, but 50 stayed silent. Instead of seeking revenge, he channels everything into his music.
I got tired of, in the recovery process, I got tired of being afraid.
Recovery takes 5 months. 50 learns how to walk again, but he also learns something else, how to turn pain into power. He starts writing with new intensity. His mixtapes caught Eminem's attention, leading to $1 million deal. Songs like Into Club and Candy Shop top charts worldwide. And the rest is hip-hop history.
Well, I don't know what the criteria is off of street credibility. Or
That's
if
it.
If there's something that creates more merit for you. I looked at that experience as something that was unfortunate.
Today, 50 is building an empire spanning TV shows, movies, and business ventures. The shooting that was meant to end his career only made him stronger. And as for McGriff, well, he's serving life in prison. He didn't just fail to kill 50 Cent that day. In doing so, he accidentally created a legend.